And we'll be looking this morning at verses 10 to 13. So verse 10 says, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might." A strange thing happened this week. I'm going through Ephesians in the morning, 1 Samuel in the evening, and this was the next passage in the Ephesians series, and we put it into the worship software. And then I turned to the 1 Samuel series and discovered that the chapter for this evening is one of the darkest chapters in the Old Testament, where King Saul resorts to witchcraft, going to a medium and consulting the powers of darkness. And so both passages really are on the same theme, the powers of darkness, how to stand against them and how to lose against them. And whenever something like that happens, morning and evening service seem to just fit or almost completely overlap, I always ask myself, what's the meaning of this? It doesn't happen often in a pastor's life, a congregation's life, but when it does, I think it deserves a pause and a question. Why would the Lord have us as a congregation be focused on two sermons on the same theme in one day? Why at this time in our history? And of course, we can't interpret providence infallibly, but we couldn't help but think that we're on the verge of a big step as a congregation, a big step of building a new church. And that is always a potentially difficult area. So far, thankfully, we have been very united, but that's not to say that will continue. We need to pray for that. We need to do spiritual battle to seek that to be continued. And of course, also, it means that we will have, God willing, a more permanent, visible presence in our community, and perhaps become another option for people to attend. Maybe people who have not been to church or not been for a long time and looking for a fresh start. And that's the kind of moment in a congregation's life that the devil really hates. The moment when a church moves from being maybe less visible, more obscure, out of the way, to more in the center of things. And therefore, we need to take this coincidence, this providence, seriously as a message from God, perhaps about these things, perhaps additional things, but it is a call to much greater awareness of the powers of darkness and their opposition to us as individuals and as a church, and to take this stance more consciously. It's war. Sometimes we get lulled into a false sense of security. Sometimes we just drift, we just forget that it's not just about church, that there is a spiritual dimension. There are forces of evil fighting forces of good. And so we are easy targets. But this calls us to a military readiness. It calls us to war. And sometimes when people approach this passage, I've seen how the focus tends to be upon the spectacular and the dramatic. The deliverance ministries, exorcisms, the occult, territorial spirits. If you go into Christian bookshops, a few that are left, you'll often see fairly large sections on this kind of theme, the spectacular, the dramatic, the sensational. And that's there for sure, but it's quite rare in a Christian's life to have that targeted at us. It might happen 2 or 3 times in our life. We're just super conscious of terribly evil, dark forces overwhelming us. The evil is almost tangible. But for most of the time, it's much more ordinary. It's much more, I don't know what you could say, mundane. And I think the context of this whole armor of God reminds us of that, because it comes after Paul's instructions for the church, for the family, and for our workplace. And these are the 3 areas where the devil and all the dark forces of evil will most often attack us. In our families, our marriages, in our workplaces, and in the church. And therefore, we need to be much more attuned to that than some, very vivid, spectacular spiritual conflict. Paul's given instructions to the church what to believe about himself, about themselves, and what they should do. And Paul brings this passage in at the end of this because he's saying this is going to meet a lot of resistance. Believing who God is, believing in what God does, believing in who God has made you, believing that this is the way to live, that's not going to enter our hearts and lives easily. It's going to meet friction, it's going to meet opposition, it's going to meet conflict. And therefore, again, it's a call to battle. And the interesting thing is that oftentimes it's not the initial target that is our big problem, whether he targets in the church with false doctrine or false practice, whether he targets the family, maybe a marriage or relationships between parents and children, or he attacks in the workplace in one way or another. He does that, but it's what comes after that that is usually our biggest problem. Our reaction to the problem, our response to the problem is usually the biggest problem, because what happens is that attack on our church, our family, our workplace, that enters our minds. And we begin to think about it. And it's these thoughts, these ordinary thoughts, that the devil most commonly uses to attack us, to damage us, and even destroy us. He plants a thought, and then a thought about that thought, and then a thought about that thought about that thought. And very soon we're in a doom spiral. He said this about me. They probably believed it. And they probably now told others. And what's going to happen to this friendship? And this is going to ruin my future. Or maybe it's an injustice. Somebody's wronged you, stolen from you, and you just can't get your mind off that. And the bitterness just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. It's that is most usually the devil's most successful weapon, the ordinary, the unexceptional, our thought life. And I don't know if you noticed in our call to worship, this is one of the other passages where Paul addresses spiritual warfare. He says we walk in the flesh, but we're not waging war according to the flesh, for the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. What does he go and talk about? What are the strongholds? The weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but of divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. You see, Paul is focused on the inner mind, the thoughts, the opinions that the devil can drop in and begin to cycle, so that becomes a habit, it becomes automatic. It becomes what's known as rumination, which is habitual negative thinking, repetitive negative thinking. And that's different from reflection. Reflection is, oh, this went wrong. What lessons can I learn? What should I do now? There's a resolution. There's no resolution to rumination. We just go down and round and down and round and down and round. This is the war that most of us are called to fight. And therefore we want to ask, can I win this war? I'm sure this is one of our battles, and for many people it is. I'm just never going to change. This is just going to be it. I can't get rid of this thought pattern, this habit, this rumination, this repetition, this negativity. How can I win this war? Because I know it's depressing me, it's making me angry, it's making me anxious, it's making me miserable, it's making my relationships suffer. How can I win this war? Well, the apostle begins by reminding us that we have the worst of enemies. Just thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, probably millions of forces are ranged against us in the Christian life. And that comes home to us when we look at some of these verses. It speaks of the schemes of the devil, the rulers, the authorities, the cosmic powers over this present darkness, the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Verses 11 to 12. It's telling us the devil has many evil schemes, and he has many evil allies. His schemes, it's not, some people say, oh, the devil told me this, or the devil did. I don't find it so easy. He doesn't generally announce himself, yeah, I'm the devil, and I'm going to make you think this, and I'm going to make you do this, and I'm going to make you say this. No, he's much more crafty. And that's why this word schemes is used. It's a very evil word. It's a word packed with what's sinister and malicious. He has one of the greatest minds, and he has the greatest evil mind in the universe. He has multiple schemes, he has multiple strategies, he has multiple tactics, he has multiple ways into our church, our family, our workplace, and therefore into our mind. He has multiple evil schemes, and he has multiple evil armies. You notice the words: rulers, authorities, cosmic powers, spiritual forces of evil. If you read a commentary on this, you'll often find people saying, well, the rulers are this kind of evil spirit, and the authorities are this kind of evil. I don't know how people can figure these things out. And I don't think we're meant to. What we're meant to take away from this is how many they are, how massive they are, and how varied they are. Many evil schemes, and he's got many evil armies. The armies of the rulers, the authorities, the cosmic powers, the spiritual force of evil. None of these are visible. All of them are invisible. And all of them are directed and pointed under the devil's coordination as their general against the church, the family, the workplace, you there, and especially your mind. And the apostle tells us this because he wants us to realize the danger we're in. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't make it sound blasé or mundane. He really wants us to grasp how evil the devil is and how many schemes and armies he has. And it's interesting too, he talks about wrestling. It's telling us This is about hand-to-hand combat. It's not even at a distance. There's a grappling. There's an intense closeness about this. We don't know how the devil and his armies can put thoughts in our minds or desires in our heart. We don't have a deep theology of the demonic in the Bible, like all these steps. And we don't need to. Or we would be told. But somehow or other, the devil and his demonic forces can access our thoughts, can plant thoughts, can multiply thoughts, can direct thoughts, can twist thoughts. And this is what we're being asked to do battle with. It's not the spectacular, the external, the extraordinary that people can see us casting out demons or standing against evil forces. It's largely invisible. It's going on in here, our hearts, our minds, our souls. It's, you might be looking at some today thinking, man, they've got such a peaceful life. Everything's just going so well for them. You have no idea what could be going on inside their minds. That person could be in the most intense life or death battle that you could ever imagine. And this battle is often about what's true and what's false, what's right, what's wrong, what's accurate, what's inaccurate. The devil and his forces can somehow see what happens in the church, the workplace, the family, and then put a thought there, or take one of our thoughts that's gone there. That's so unfair. And then begin the spiral. Over and over and over again. It might be temptation. The devil plants a thought about an addiction maybe we've had in the past. And then he says, you deserve a little taste again. Because you've been so good for so long. Maybe I do. And it would only be once. Yeah, it would only be once. You could do it without anyone finding out. That's true. But then, God might know. No, that we can do this in a way that no one finds out. So the devil's got you in temptation, you fall. And then afterwards, that's when he really goes to work. You are so guilty. You are so condemned. There is no way back for you now. You've really blown it. You're a disgrace of a Christian. Don't even think about seeking forgiveness. And you start thinking these thoughts yourself. Why am I like this? Why do I cave so easily? Why do I forget the consequences? Why don't I use the resources God has given me? And here I am again. So, you have the worst of enemies, but you have the best of generals. Be strong in the Lord. We are weak, but he is strong. And he tells us here, you have the Lord's presence. Be strong in the Lord. Soldiers fighting a battle alone, as an individual, against great forces. What hope? There's no hope. But you put that soldier with a great general who's going to guide and direct and lead. then I have hope. Then I can fight. And then I can win. And what the Christian's being told here is that you are never alone. You are in the Lord. That's one of the great emphases of Ephesians. You are actually united to him and his power. And remember, he's a general who has fought the hardest battle of all and won. He knows how to win against the devil. And so, you have the Lord's presence. You are in him. He is in you, Christian. And you have the Lord's power. Be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Not strong in your own might. Every verb here about be strong is in the passive. It's not you go and strengthen yourself. It's you be strengthened by an outside force. Be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. You don't need to be a strong Christian. All you need is a strong Christ. You have his presence. You have his power at your disposal. And you have the Lord's protection as well. Put on the whole armor of God. And what we'll see in coming weeks is that each of these pieces of armor are specially tailored to help us win the battle of the mind. That God has specifically designed and crafted each piece of this armor, and we need it all. It's the whole armor of God. If you look at this passage, what do we have? We have 6 pieces of armor: God's truth, God's righteousness, God's gospel, God-given faith, God's salvation, and God's word. What's that telling us? It's pointing us away from ourselves at every single piece of armor and to God. So it's not just he gives us armor and then says, get on with it. He is our armor. And he's in each pieces of these armor, of this armor. And then you have the Lord's promise. Having done all, to stand. At the end of verse 13. You know, sometimes we think, oh man, I'd love to be a really heroic soldier. Maybe, you know, if I'd been alive, I would have been holding that flag at Iwo Jima. Probably not, David. But, you know, we like to think of ourselves as that warrior who advances and takes ground and conquers. But the most common verb in this passage is not advance. It's stand. 4 times. Stand, 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 stand. In spiritual terms, just standing is heroic. Holding your ground against these waves of assault that come through these 3 main areas, but are all centered in grabbing our minds and distorting our view of God, his truth, his salvation, ourselves, and of everyone else as well. So this isn't conquest by aggression, it's conquest by simply refusing to be moved. And we have God's promise that he'll hold us fast. And it's not saying that we never fall down. We do. That we're commanded to stand, that implies we will fall. But as the Psalms say, a righteous man falls 7 times and gets up again. Stand. If you can, keep standing. If you fall, stand again, and stand again, and stand again. Hold your ground. And the more we use that armor, And the more we draw on the Lord's strength, the more we will hold the ground that we are on. And that in itself is a triumph. That's why, as a pastor, it's just a great privilege to see sufferers in our congregation. Some people have suffered so much. It's often the godliest people. And they're maybe not doing, very spectacular, visible work. But boy, are they battling. They sure are standing. Despite the immeasurable forces and waves that come against them. And even when they stumble at times, even when the devil gets through the defenses and gets the mind and grabs the mind and pulls them down, they know where to go back to and stand again by God's grace. So how can I fight this battle? We have the best of generals, the Lord's presence, the Lord's power, the Lord's protection, and the Lord's promise. Can I win the war with all of that on my side? Although you may have many murderous enemies, and you do, victory is guaranteed because you have the Lord's presence, power, protection, and promise. Here are our resources, and in every step it's look away from yourself. It's not a call to Christian toughness. It's a call to Christian dependence in our weakness. So what does that look like? What does it actually look like to be strong in the Lord? Let me give you two quick contrasts. I want to tell you what it doesn't look like, and then what it does. First of all, let's call this the mind grind. This is rumination. The mind grind. Oftentimes the Ukraine war is called a meat grinder because it's just wave after wave after wave of humanity being ground up in the viciousness of war. Well, this is the devil's great aim. He's out to grind your mind down. And he does it, first of all, by making you pick up a thought, a memory, a sentence, something someone said, a fear, a criticism. He says, here's a thought for you. Just pick it up. Right, you've got it. You've got it strong now. Play it back. That's the second step. Pick it up. Now, play it again and again and again and again and again. The third step is prediction. As you go through all these scenarios in your imagination, what happened, what will happen, you begin to predict, well, this will probably lead to this, or this will mean that, or the consequences will be the next thing. And then, maybe the worst part of this, prosecute. Pick up, play back, predict, prosecute. You start prosecuting these people in your mind. It's like an inner courtroom. In fact, you may be in the dock. You may put yourself in the dock, especially after you've fallen into temptation, but you build a case against them, against her, against him, sometimes against God himself, sometimes against ourselves. We marshal arguments, we gather evidence, we defend ourselves, we accuse the other, and we come to a verdict and a condemnation. And that's not the end of it. Because the fifth step is persist. You just do it all over again, and all over again, and all over again. There's no end, there's no resolution. That's why it's called the mind grind. This is the devil's great success. But there's an alternative. And let's call it the faith stand. Standing in the faith. What does that look like? Well, first of all, recognize the rumination. Recognize that persistent negative thought. Say, this is the devil. He's bringing this thought into my mind, and he's getting you to think without God. That's rumination. Thinking without bringing God into the picture. The first step, if you want to beat that, is notice it. Recognize it for what it is. And then secondly, reject self-reliance. You're not going to beat this. You can lie in bed at 3 a.m. in the morning, wide awake, and you are ruminating and ruminating. You've got the inner courtroom. You've put so many people in that dock and condemned them, but there's never an end to it. You say, I've got to stop this. Come on, try harder. It doesn't work. Reject self-reliance. Reject self-help. And thirdly, run to God. Run to God. Bring everything to him. Say, Lord, here I am again at 3 a.m. in the morning, or driving along in my car, and I can't stop this mind grind. Help me. I need help. Fourthly, rehearse the truth. Get the truth that will combat this lie about God, about his word, about his people, about that person, about these circumstances, about this sin, about salvation, whatever it is, find a truth. And we'll be doing more of that as we look at the different parts of the armor. But instead of ruminating, start rehearsing, bringing truth into your mind, and then respond in faith. Go and do the next thing. Do what God calls you to do. Get back to your work, to your calling, to your responsibilities. And this cycle might happen again in 5 minutes' time. Go through the same faith stand all over again. Recognize, reject self-reliance, run to God, rehearse the truth, and respond in faith. Stop rehearsing the problem and start rehearsing the promises. Rumination rehearses the problem in the absence of God. Faith rehearses the truth in the presence of God. And if you've never begun to battle, if you don't have this kind of battle, this faith that stands, you need the general. You need to come to him and say, either I'm in a terrible battle and I've lost so many times, ended up in such a mess, please help me. Or when I look ahead, I don't see any end to this. Can you change my story? Can you give me a different ending? Come to Jesus, who can give you the right truths at the right time, with the right spirit. And so you will stand in faith. Let's pray.